is Sanjay Padhee. I am the CEO of ClearFactor. So our vision is to create a global invoice finance ecosystem where every viable SME, anywhere in the world, is able to access fair interest rate working capital in the form of invoice finance via a democratized and decentralized ecosystem. Before I go into details, I have laid out some key partnership and the team skills that we have, primarily because we are not yet a startup, we are starting up. We have been working at it for a year and a half. We have built the concept, we have built the design, we have built the technology choices, we have built the algorithms, we've done a lot of things, but we haven't built the systems yet. We've put a team together. Now, our first key partnership is Decimal Factor. It's a brokerage firm for the SMEs, a lending brokerage platform for the SMEs, founded in 2008, after the financial crisis in 2008. The alternate lending market space was still small then, although quite a large market now. And we have, so these are all stakeholders in ClearFactor. So Decimal Factor has a user base of about 1,500. Those who have used the system and have been helped get loans through Decimal Factor. There are about 650,000 UK SMEs that Decimal Factor has data on, and this data grows on almost on a monthly basis. It has been developed over 10 years and keeps getting updated every month, every quarter, every time that happens. Now, there is nothing special about the data, except that no one else has it, and the banks can't afford to keep data on the micro SMEs and the small scale SMEs that we are focusing on. We have, and the chairman of Decimal Factor is also the chairman of ClearFactor, and he's right over there, Ricky Shankar, who is also an ex-businessman who exited his business in 2016. The next key partner is Electric Consulting. Now, all of them are researchers. They are into R&D, specifically in the decentralized protocols, and all of them are researchers at UCL Center for Blockchain Technology as well. I mean, they have been working with us for over a year now. And in the team, we have, since our ecosystem is quite diverse in the sense we have the SME, who is the invoice finance seller. We have the debtor, who is the customer of the SME. We have the underwriter who writes the invoice, and I'll go into some of those details later. We have quite a wide variety of players in our ecosystem, and most of our team has been built keeping that in mind. So we have UK invoice finance specialists. We have UK people with networks in underwriting. We have people with knowledge of invoice finance market space in the UK, and also about the challenges in acquiring customers. Most of them obviously ex-bankers. We have people who are experienced in global payment platforms and payment platforms in general. So by global payment platforms, I refer to all the challenges of having an ecosystem where money can flow across different countries. We have the supply chain relationship, data relationship, and also experience in large-scale IT delivery, cybersecurity, and digital asset trading as well within the team. Looking at the audience and hearing some of the questions, I don't think there is anyone in this room who does not know about invoice finance. Primarily, an invoice finance is an instrument that is very valuable to the SME, specifically the small players. It is probably, after their business itself and any other physical infrastructure they have, the most valuable asset that they can trade for cash. And the bank, if it chooses to service that SME, can lend a certain amount of money in return for that invoice, and in return for an extraordinary amount of interest hidden in various layers. And on behalf of the SME, depending on whether you choose discounting or factoring, on behalf of the SME, collects the money from the debtor. The invoice finance market globally is quite large. However, when we talk about that market, we are talking about the market that is already addressed by banks. The market that is unaddressed by banks is quite large as well, which is where we are focusing on. And although the World Bank says the funding gap across the world is 2.3 million, it could be much larger than that. That analysis is primarily for developing countries. In the UK, we know that the funding gap could be as much as 400 to 500 billion pounds. There are about 1 million SMEs in the region of, with under 10 employees, generating about £750,000 revenue on an average, that are completely unfunded or untouched by the banks. Invoice finance can seem unfair. There are lock-ins, so banks want your full ledger, and they want it for at least a year. They have different kinds of hidden costs in terms of management fees, service fees, renewal charges, penalties, other fees. Ricky himself has been a user of invoice finance for 15 years. And by his admission, he has never paid less than 28% in terms of fees, including interest and other penalties a year. They also require a personal guarantee, and they can be quite inflexible. So we can discuss all of this in details during the networking session, but I don't think there is any of you here. I talked to Lucy as well, and I don't think there is any of you here who would not know about these things. Clear Factor, fairer solution. Primarily, we are planning to be a global ecosystem where any SME from anywhere in the world can come into the ecosystem, submit his invoice in any currency of his choice, which is most likely to be the currency of the invoice, and go through the ecosystem, go through the different layers of auto underwriting. One of them is automated, which is the score from us, the DF score and the CF score. The other bit of it is manual, slightly, in the sense that the underwriter, who is also a player in the ecosystem, who's local to the country of the debtor, gives an underwriting score, which then goes up for auction, and then the different investors, and that includes individual investors, trade investors, institutional investors, invest in different interest rate pots, and the pot that fills up the earliest is offered to the SME. And if the SME agrees to the interest rate offered, then the money is given to the SME. In terms of institutional investors, again, when they invest in different rate pots, part of it part of it is manual, which is you can do it manually. Part of it is automated as well, where they can specify in advance what are the different scores they would like to see across different countries, for which they would like a pot of money to be allocated. How it works, we have basically gone through this in that earlier slide. All of the users in the ecosystem, the SME, the debtor, the underwriter, the advertiser, the individual investor, the broker, and anyone like an institutional investor, all of them have some kinds of rewards in the ecosystem. What makes Clear Factor unique we have gone through some of these points, but primarily, if you look back 5 years, it was impossible to have a vision like this, where we could have a global invoice finance system, which is why none of the banks have it, where we could transfer value across different countries cheaply and quickly. And also, when we talk about an SME from different countries, we are talking about the payment being in actual cash, both for the SME and the debtor paying back into the ecosystem. As you'd have known by now, we are using blockchain, but we're using two different kinds of protocols. We're using Ethereum for generating the token that will enable this transfer of value across the different parts of the world cheaply and economically. And also, for those people who exclusively want to deal with fiat, whether it's a trade investor or anyone else, or even an individual investor from anywhere else in the world outside of UK. And also for SMEs outside of UK who would like, outside of UK, who obviously want their invoice to be paid in cash, we use Stellar. What this shows is, all of the people in the ecosystem are being rewarded. Like I said, it's Ethereum and Stellar, and we have a very heavy-duty auction element, and Ethereum is primarily being used for the auction consensus between the SME and the different investors, and Stellar for primarily fiat money transfers across the border. Why blockchain? There is absolutely no other way of transferring fiat, as far as we are concerned, cheaper and faster than using Stellar. And Ethereum, primarily because it is inclusive and therefore distributed across the world, and therefore truly immutable, as opposed to a blockchain with a small number of user base or small subscribers, or distributed across 100, 200, or 1,000 or 10,000 people. And most importantly, besides the fact that it has a Turing complete programming language, and immutability has certain fraud prevention measures, it allows us to build a token that can be used as a transfer of value across the world within our ecosystem. Roadmap: by this time, hopefully next year, we should have our, you should be close to having our MVP ready. We are having an IEO, hopefully either at the end of May or in the beginning of June. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Just a quick question.
Absolutely.
Your CFDF scores, do you have them outside of UK, or what are you dependent on?
So the DF score is currently existing for about 650,000 SMEs
In UK?
in the UK. It's not outside of UK. However, there is, besides these data points, there is an algorithm behind that as well that matches, that comes up with the score based on the data gathered on the SME, and it has different data points, like for example credit rating, and all of those are part of that as well. So which means that if we are able to get that same data from from the other SMEs, we can generate the DF score for that, after which we apply the CF score. Now, that, however...
So you mean in other countries?
No, UK. For other countries, for each country, it has to be independently, the data has to be independently verified, because the circumstances of each country would be different. So the same criteria for an SME from the UK might not apply to an SME from India, for example, or from Bangladesh, or from Nigeria, or I mean, it depends. So each country will come with its own our interpretation of the data, and therefore, whatever artificial intelligence or whatever algorithm we are using, analyzing that data to come up with this score. So we might need more data for an SME from Uganda, for example, than we might need for. So for UK, we practically know what do we need. Not only from the algorithm that we have from decimal factor, but we have been in discussions with a lot of the banks across the UK, and either chief execs or people in positions who have dealt with the details of the data required from the SME, and we more or less know what is the data we need from an UK SME. Thank you.